Brown, and next to me is Affiant Detective Chris Jones from the East Peter Township Police Department. Next to him is Corporal Todd McCurdy from the Pennsylvania State Police. Next to him we have Captain Bradley Getz from the Pennsylvania State Police, and then finally Lieutenant Chris Weinsberg, also with the Pennsylvania State Police. Today, just moments ago, Justo Smoker, the man responsible for the abduction and tragic murder of 18-year-old Linda Stoltzfus, entered pleas of guilty to third-degree murder, kidnapping, abuse of corpse, possession of an instrument of crime, and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. Smoker pled guilty pursuant to a plea agreement with the Commonwealth, which required that Smoker provide law enforcement information that would lead to the recovery of Linda Stoltzfus's remains. In exchange, the Commonwealth agreed to a sentence of 35.5 to 71 years in a state correctional institution, which ultimately was imposed by the court today. In addition, as a result of this conviction, Smoker now faces an additional sentence of up to 17.5 years by the State Parole Board for violating the terms of his parole. Smoker had been paroled only 16 months before committing this horrific crime from a 12.5 to 30-year sentence imposed on a string of armed robberies and burglaries, many with Amish victims. While I have every confidence that Smoker will serve his full, unexpired balance given his criminal history and the heinous nature of this crime, any sentence imposed by the State Parole Board must, by law, be served prior to Smoker beginning the sentence imposed today. In total, Smoker may serve up to 88.5 years of incarceration as a result of the agreement and sentence imposed today. This effectively is a life sentence for Smoker. From the outset of this case, we sought to secure justice for Linda, her family, and the community by focusing on 3 goals: to bring Linda home so that she would be granted the dignity and respect that she so richly deserved, while also providing her family with some measure of closure by affording them the opportunity for a proper burial. Next, to secure a murder conviction, and finally, to ensure the protection of society. Today, through this negotiated plea agreement and sentence, we successfully achieved each of those goals. By bringing Linda home and securing the conviction and effective life sentence imposed today, there is simply no question that justice has been served. It is important to note that we reached this result today only through the tireless efforts of multiple law enforcement agencies. Because of their dedication and unwavering commitment to this case, Linda's attacker was identified, apprehended, charged with homicide, and now committed to a sentence that will ensure that he will never have the freedom to harm innocent citizens again. As you recall, this investigation began as a missing persons case, as law enforcement worked diligently to uncover what happened to Linda, who seemingly disappeared without a trace. Searches by law enforcement and members of the Amish community commenced immediately. The FBI also quickly joined the investigation. Information about Linda was posted on flyers, billboards, social media, and news reports. Investigators pored over video evidence collected in the case, and it was the video footage that would lead to the break in the case. Smoker was arrested only 3 weeks after the abduction, after investigators digitally enhanced video footage from a camera located approximately 334 yards from where Stoltzfus was kidnapped. After the video was enhanced, the footage showed a very pixelated but discernible recording of the kidnapping itself, which was just truly remarkable in and of itself. Even after the arrest of Smoker on kidnapping charges, searches for Linda's remains continued. Investigators, along with 15 specialized search and rescue teams from surrounding areas, spent over 15,000 man-hours searching for her remains, knowing that she had suffered harm at the hands of Smoker. In total, over 2,334 searchers covered 10,500 acres, utilizing multiple resources, including drones, canines, horses, ATV, submarines, helicopters, and ground-penetrating radar. My office filed homicide charges in December of last year, commonly referred to as a no-body homicide. Despite not having found Linda's body, we were confident in our ability to achieve a murder conviction and lengthy sentence that would protect the community. But with the passage of time, investigators became less confident in our ability to bring Linda home. This agreement was the surest way to achieve all three of our goals in this case. Both investigators and Linda's family agreed, and so we pursued that avenue. In April of this year, investigators met with Smoker and his attorneys. During the interview, Smoker confessed that he abducted Stoltzfus, strangled her, and stabbed her in the neck, reportedly to ensure death. He stated that he initially buried her at the location behind 3104 Harvest Drive in Bronx, where police would later recover Linda's bra and stockings. Smoker also confirmed that a few days later, on June 23rd, he moved the remains to a location behind his former place of employment after he realized that the burial site was in fact close to where Linda lived. Armed with specific information provided by Smoker, members of the East Lampeter Township Police Department, the Pennsylvania State Police, and the FBI's Evidence Recovery Team canvassed an area alongside the Amtrak Railway to the rear of Smoker's former place of employment, located in Gap along Route 41. I'm going to show a picture here. This is an aerial picture on the TV screen of the business where Smoker had formerly been employed. To the left side of the screen is Route 41. To the right side of the screen, paralleling Route 41, would be the Amtrak railroad tracks. And you can see the businesses pictured there with multiple parking lots. Investigators searched the immediate area described to them by Smoker, but were unable to locate the remains or any site indicative of a grave. This picture is taken from a parking lot of the business. It shows a stone graveled walking path that leads up to the tree line. Behind the tree line would be the railroad tracks. As you can see, this area is not easily accessible as the walking path ends before the tree line. Investigators, unable to find the site or any indication of a grave, then escorted Smoker from the East Lampeter Township Police Station to the burial site, and within a short time, Linda's remains were recovered, wrapped in a tarp, and buried approximately 42 inches deep. The next picture will show a better perspective of what the area looked like in general. Now you're up at the railroad tracks. And Andy, if you can go to the very last picture. So if you see the area between the metal posting and the green bush, Linda was recovered in that area. And you can see, if you can see the laser pointer kind of hovering around the grass there, is where she was finally recovered. Thank you. We fully anticipated that the recovery of Linda's remains would lead to additional disturbing details about what took place after she was abducted on June 21st of last year. An autopsy was performed and concluded that Linda died of asphyxia as a result of strangulation and of a stab wound to the neck. The autopsy revealed that she also had traumatic vaginal injury consistent with sexual assault. Her body was clothed with her hands and feet tied together with multiple bindings. A thin rope connected each of the bindings together and was looped around her neck. Her sash and apron were wrapped tightly around her face, and her mouth was covered by duct tape. Learning the additional details of Linda's death has been heartbreaking and difficult, to say the least, but bringing Linda home was a critical component of our mission to secure justice for Linda, her family, and the Amish community as a whole. After Linda was returned to her home in Upper Leacock Township, the family was able to hold a funeral and give her a proper burial. Although Linda's recovery led us to additional painful details about the circumstances of her death, bringing her home also ensured a conviction here today and a sentence that was specifically structured to practically ensure that Smoker will never be released. Factually, this case is horrific and tragic, and thankfully, extraordinarily rare. But equally extraordinary were the efforts of the members of law enforcement and their commitment to securing justice. Through the dogged determination of investigators and prosecutors, Linda's attacker was identified, captured, and convicted, and as a result, society will be protected from Smoker for what will likely amount to the rest of his natural life. Of course, our thoughts and prayers continue to be with the Stoltzfus family, and we ask that they please be given privacy during this difficult and emotional time. At this time, I would like to briefly turn it over to law enforcement to make additional statements. Chief Zerby.
Thank you, DA Adams. Good morning, everyone. I just want to make a brief statement to acknowledge the cooperation, collaboration of multiple agencies and volunteers that went into this investigation. We were fortunate enough to have a large amount of public support, as exemplified by the more than 2,300 volunteers who spent months, and as the DA stated, over 15,000 man-hours searching over 10,000 acres of eastern Lancaster County. And much of this effort was carried by the Amish community itself, as well as volunteer firefighters, search and rescue crews, canine search teams, EMS crews, and all of these searches were managed and coordinated by volunteers who put in countless hours. I want to thank all of those people for their tireless efforts and everything they did to help with this investigation. To our law enforcement colleagues, I would like to thank all the officers, the detectives, and the agents who worked on this case, from the FBI, Pennsylvania State Police, West Lampeter Township Police Department, Manheim Township Police Department, Lancaster City Police Department, Lancaster County Detectives, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office. Thank you all for your hard work. And to the chiefs and managers and elected officials of those agencies, thank you for sparing your people. We're also very grateful to all the community members who supported us and the volunteers by providing food and water during the early days of this investigation. Thank you for that support. In closing, I would just like to encourage everyone to continue to remember the Stoltzfus family in their thoughts and prayers as they move forward. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name's Bradley Getz, and I'm the commanding officer at Troop J. I know I don't know a lot of you guys. On behalf of the Pennsylvania State Police, I want to again offer our sincere condolences to the family of Linda Stoltzfus. Our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to them. This was a case that hit home for a lot of us in law enforcement, having daughters, and the state police were eager and willing to help out in any way we could. And I want to thank Chief Zerby and the Stoltzfus family for allowing us to assist in this investigation. And I also want to thank all those community volunteers and search and rescue organizations that put in numerous hours trying to locate Linda. I know I was out there some of the days. They were very hot days, and the terrain was definitely not easy, so thank you again. I want to commend the investigators and the prosecutors involved in this case. You know, they put in a lot of time and effort, and these cases take some mental strain on the investigators, so I really want to commend you, and you got us here today, so great job. Unfortunately, nothing can right this horrific wrong, but as law enforcement and prosecutors, our goal is to achieve the best outcome, and I fully support DA Adams, and I truly believe this plea agreement allowed for the best outcome. And I'm hopeful this will bring some closure, or a little bit more closure, to the Stoltzfus family, and a sense of justice to everyone involved. So, thanks.
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't thank First Assistant Todd Brown and First Deputy Travis Anderson, who worked so diligently on all aspects of this case, and they navigated this case from early on in the investigation to the successful conclusion today. So thank you, gentlemen, for your work. Questions? Yes.
Judge Atwood understood the need to bring Linda home and have a sense of closure for the family, but he also said he had some concern that this was a Faustian bargain. I'm wondering how conflicted you and law enforcement were in coming to this plea agreement, and what impact the family had on reaching the agreement.
So, I think an unfortunate probably use of that term. Certainly we don't feel like we sold our soul or entered into a deal with the devil at all. I can tell you that all of us standing here were 100% behind this agreement. It was thought about and analyzed closely. If you're asking, did he deserve more, that's a fair question, and it's a question we asked ourselves. But I can tell you that every time that we asked ourselves that question, we answered that by instead answering the question, what does the family deserve? Because he was not the only person in this equation. So the family's interest in giving Linda a proper burial, that did become paramount, not only for them, but for us. But it did not undermine our other goals of securing a murder conviction and securing a sentence that would protect the public for what is the rest of his natural life.
Were you guys ready to continue searching without his help? Or did the family say it's time?
No, I would say, I think you're asking how the agreement came to be. I would say that, again, a combination of a number of factors. Our goals from the beginning were to bring her home, to secure a murder conviction, and to protect the public. We were confident in our ability, prior to entering into this agreement, of our ability to convict him and secure a very lengthy, likely a life without parole sentence. But as time went by, excuse me, we became less confident in our ability to find her. And knowing what we know now, we fully believe we would never have found her without his help. So it was really the fact that we identified this plea agreement as a way to effectuate all of our goals, and at that point we pursued it.
When did the plea agreement go into effect? When did he propose that he wanted to do this?
April 20, I did have that. April 21st?
So the agreement was officially signed on April 21st, the same day he gave
The
statement.
confession. And that would be the same day we recovered her body.
Do you,
I have two different questions for you. Number one, you said that he helped lead you to the body. Did he actually go with investigators to the site and show you where Linda was buried?
So initially he gave detailed information and even drew a map for the investigators. The investigators went to that location, and in the final picture essentially that you saw, but were unable, even with detailed information, to really determine where the burial site might be. If you recall that she was buried 42 inches deep, and you could see by that picture there's no evidence, outward evidence of where she may be. So at that point they retrieved him, and he was taken to the site, and he did then show his best estimate of where it was. I believe there was 2 other sites that were looked at very close to where she was found until they found her.
My other question was, in court today there were a lot of words of regret coming from the defense side, but there was also a lot of considerable actions to cover up this crime by moving the body. So my question for you is, what time in the process did you notice Smoker turning a corner towards cooperation with police? Was that from the beginning, or was that midway through the process?
I'm going to ask you to answer that because you were more directly involved with the pre-writing.
So I can only tell you the perspective that the Commonwealth has, right? Because obviously I'm not privy to the conversations that he has with his counsel. So my perspective could be entirely different than what actually occurred in terms of their plan and their philosophy. But so the deal was consummated on the 21st. Certainly in the days immediately preceding that, I was meeting daily with Mr. Tallarico and discussing the prospect, because again, it's a process, right? There's a legal process to this whole agreement, and there's an emotional process, and there's a strategic process, both to the prosecution and to the defense. And so also having the family involved was obviously part of that process. So it's not something that, I also want to dispel the notion that some people may have a concept that this was done overnight, right? That all the Commonwealth needed to do was ask and they shall receive, and this would all be done. It's a lengthy process, and quite frankly, it's not out of the pure goodness of Mr. Smoker's heart, right? The evidence, while circumstantial, was immense, and I would argue very convincing. And there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. There's a lot of things that go into why we present the evidence that we presented at 2 preliminary hearings, and other avenues of how we present evidence to his attorney to then present to him, that gets him to a place to begin to have these types of discussions. So it's a long-winded answer, but it's a long process to get there. But really the days leading up to the 21st of this year is really when we started talking about terms.
I guess what I'm asking is, that first interview, was it mostly denial on his part, or was it mostly silence on Smoker's part?
Which first interview?
The first interview that Smoker ever had with police about what happened.
Yeah, so I don't believe that's public record, so I'm not able to comment on the first interview. So he was interviewed the day of his arrest. Obviously, he denied generally everything.
Was it a gradual process to go from stonewalling, denial, to then leading you to the body?
I mean, I think that's fair. It took 10 months, so.
If I can ask it this way, maybe, Chris in court tried to portray Justo as coming to accept some responsibility and even having remorse and regret. Do you believe that, or do you believe he was coming from a position of trying to save his butt as best he could with the death penalty potentially on the
I'm not in a position to be able to get inside of his mind. I can't comment on that.
Just wondering, perhaps the personal toll, all of you see and handle difficult cases, but where you would position this case and the emotions that it elicits.
I would say for me, rather than a personal toll, if you're asking how it affected, I would prefer to answer that as to what was actually reaffirmed for me through this case. And that is the way we approach cases in this office, by taking each case on its own and evaluating each case based on the facts and circumstances of the case before us. Obviously, this was a very unique case, but to me it reaffirms the notion that there is no easy way to get to justice. There's no magical formula for justice, but by focusing on our 3 goals in this case, we strongly feel and believe that justice was served.
Did any of the family members have contact with Justo Smoker? And if they did that potentially lead, Smoker to maybe divulge information on where the body was at?
I have no information that the family members were contacted by Smoker.
One thing that's just so striking about this is if there was never that video captured, how does that hit you, and what do you, who do you thank for that?
Well, I'll give you the answer to that in the form of Detective Chris Jones, but you're right, that was, at least to the prosecutors, that seemed to be the break in the case. And I'll ask Detective Jones to step up to talk a little bit more about the video itself and finding the video.
Yes, so we wanted to talk a little bit about the video. When we first went to retrieve that video from the house, it was not available. The owner thought that there was something wrong with his system and it had overwritten, and the investigators who I sent there came back and said, unfortunately, we don't have anything. We sent people back the following day who simply unplugged it, and we said, you know, at this point in time, we have someone who's missing out of thin air in the middle of nowhere. We need to give every shot at this. At this point in time, we had already asked for help from the FBI. They had some people on scene. We quickly retrieved that system, provided to them. They took it to their office, I think in Philadelphia, and we started the process through of carving that information off. That didn't happen immediately, and then when we finally did get that carved and got it back, now we had a big block of video, and then we went through the process of looking at cars, looking who went through. But the reality of actually seeing the abduction, like I think D.A. Adams said, it was 300 plus yards away. You really couldn't see it with a naked eye well at all. So through our investigation, through interviews and hundreds of interviews, we went several different directions prior to this video. With over 1,000 tips coming in, we were able to start to look at the red car specifically, and actually started working on the red car before we even saw the abduction. So I think there's a myth that we had this video and then we see this red car and we see the registration plate and we go get them, and that's not what happened. We had the red car, but we did not have a registration plate. We knew we had a second generation Kia Rio that was red. And I was surprised by how many of those there are in Pennsylvania and in the surrounding counties, and we started a meticulous process of trying to narrow that down. And we actually landed with several suspects, to include Mr. Smoker, prior to actually seeing the abduction video.
So you, to be clear, that I'm understanding this correctly, you maybe could have got him without the video. You had him identified.
No, from the video.
From the video.
From that video.
Oh, okay, not from other people reporting.
Not from that video.
A red car driving around.
There was a red car, but that's all we had was a
Okay.
red car.
You
It was
did not know
that
there was-
particular
okay.
video
Okay.
that narrowed it down to a Kia Rio, and through the video we were able to tell
All right, thank you.
the different generation it was. So that process unfolded, and then we started to look at Mr. Smoker because of some other areas of concern. And that's, through that process is when one of our investigators, I'll give his name, Detective Scott Eelman, said, "What's that?" And it was just a little itsy bitsy pixel, for lack of a better word, that was then enhanced and enhanced and enhanced and enhanced and got us to where we could see the abduction.
What other areas of concern led you to initially believe Mr. Smoker?
Proximity, I think I can say this, prior criminal history, stuff like that were concerning for us.
I have a question. There was a lot of tip calls coming into Lancaster about this. Was his name ever mentioned in any of those calls, and how many tips may have you received about him?
We received 0 tips about him. We processed over 1,000 tips, and that's what's kind of important. Like, we're smaller, the police department. The resources that were brought in were necessary to get to this conclusion. We processed so much information. We interviewed hundreds of people. Out of that 1,000 tips, probably 80% of those came prior to us identifying him. So we had people going every different direction. 14 to 16 hours. Agents from the FBI, state police were there with us. And at the end of the day, at 10, 11 o'clock at night, we would process tips to prepare for the next day. You have to remember, she had no digital footprint. So she disappeared in the middle of nowhere. So it was a long process, and it wasn't an easy process.
Did any of the videotapes show him in the area more so than just that day? Could he have been scoping out the area, or?
If you read the affidavit of probable cause, do you want me to answer that? Or do you want to
Yeah,
answer
you
it?
can answer.
If you read the affidavit of probable cause the day prior, after he was arrested, we got some tips showing that he had been following other Amish girls, and then we did find some video surveillance there the day prior, and obviously the video surveillance after the abduction on adjacent road. Okay, so during the investigation, we pulled video surveillance from countless places, not knowing what we were looking for, and then after we knew what we were looking for, then we went back hundreds of hours of review to piece together what you guys got to see in 2 or 3 minutes at a preliminary hearing takes hundreds of hours to put together.
I'm sorry, so can you clarify, do you think he was out that day looking specifically for an Amish girl and not just any girl or any person that he could abduct?
So I mean, the evidence certainly suggested that. Given the area that he was in was predominantly Amish, given the evidence that we found from the day before, specific reports of him turning around and coming back to places where Amish females were walking.
The spokesman, Samuel Blank for the Amish, said that we will never be the same. In dealing with the Amish community, I'm just wondering any thoughts on the relationship and their feelings and thoughts after this.
Well, certainly I can understand the place where they're coming from and why he made that statement. And I've heard from one or two Amish community members through other dealings with my office that made similar statements. And as sad as it is good that they're going to watch their surroundings now, and they're going to be more aware. And it's sad that they have to do that, but in the world we live in, it's probably best. And Barb, you actually asked about the personal effect on us, and I did want to ask my first assistant, because he was directly involved with the case, if you wanted to answer that, Todd.
So, I mean, again, along the same general theme that DA Adams followed. Yeah, as a prosecutor, right, there's a lot of things to take into consideration, and for doing this over 20 years, really, again, this case does, again, reaffirm for me, really, you look to the victims for justice. I mentioned that in court this morning as well, because it's very easy for armchair quarterbacking to occur, and you really look at the victims to see what that justice looks like. And in this case, I've met with Lloyd and Susie, and I met with them on the eve of finding Linda, when I didn't approach them until I had an agreement in principle with Mr. Tallarico, and finally met with them. And similar to what Mr. Blank said today, you know, their focus all along was, you guys handle the legalities, we want Linda, and that's what their focus was all along. And so they've that's really what I take away from it. And when you look at it from a prosecutor standpoint, we checked off all the boxes. When you talk about accountability, it's checked off. When you talk about protecting the community, it's checked off. When you talk about giving the victims peace and comfort, it's checked off. So from a prosecutor standpoint, there was, once we got to a number where we were satisfied that it was a de facto life sentence, and we were able to bring her home to her family, there was really little left to contemplate.
And I would just add, you know, in this society, we place such great emphasis on the ceremony of a funeral and giving someone a proper burial. And one could even say that to the Amish, they even have more of a desire to do that, because they have such strong religious faith. So that goal was very important to us. But meanwhile, like Todd said, we checked our other boxes too. So I think this is justice. I think this is a successful resolution.
In terms of the 17 years that I know that he has to serve that first, and then this sentencing can begin, when does that start? Has it already started?
Well, so to be clear, that process will start now. So the conviction today enables the Pennsylvania State Parole Board to move forward on violating him. So whatever sentence that the State Parole Board would give him has not occurred yet, but whatever that sentence is will run well, actually be first before he starts his court sentence today. I said in my comments, and First Assistant Brown said in court, that we're confident that the State Parole Board will max him out, is the term. And I can say that because looking at the circumstances of this case, if you look back to when he was sentenced back in 2007 by the judge made a comment that he was giving him a 12-and-a-half-year sentence on, it was over a dozen offenses, so that he could see the light of day and make something of himself. So that was his first chance. His second chance came when the state parole board paroled him at his minimum after serving 12-and-a-half years. That was his second chance. He got out, he did have a job, he had his roof over his head, but despite having those things, he was not able to conform to the rules of society, and he violated. And he didn't violate by not showing up to an appointment or by drinking alcohol. He violated by committing an offense that was the most violent offense we can commit, and more violent than the ones he had already committed. So when looking at that, those circumstances plus the heinous nature of this crime, I don't know who in their right mind would give him a third chance. In addition to just the facts and circumstances, we will be drafting and writing a letter to the parole board, making our comments clear. We will be reaching out to the victims in those prior cases from 2007 to see if they want to also offer comment. I don't know their time frame, though.
I'm sorry, you don't know the.
I don't know how quickly I think they will move quickly to initially violate him, but the determination of what he gets, I don't know that time
But
frame.
the moving to violate him hinged on
The
today's.
conviction,
Okay,
yes.
so this starts the clock, for lack of a better word, and then our questions are next to them.
Yes,
They have 120 days.
thank you.
Okay.
When would he go to state prison?
That will depend on the transportation from Lancaster County Prison to the state prison.
It could be.
I would say.
The parole violation has nothing to do with
Right,
his
so
transportation.
He can be transported like immediately.
Yes.
Yes.
And you're confident corrections would keep him in the longer from the 35 and a half to 71 years?
I mean, the same analysis would certainly apply. Yes, I would hope so. Okay, thank you very much.